Hello everyone, I'm Ace0. I talk about topics I find interesting or fun related to gacha games. And low tier / less used / niche characters are very interesting for me. If you have never watched my Can They Be Saved video, I have a couple of rules set for myself when discussing the changes / buff for the characters. 1. The changes or buff will not result in me in this hypothetical scenario makes more animation. However, addition to UI, icon, new effects is a-okay. 2. I'll try, this is a keyword, to make them not as broken as the newer, shinier units. Just bring the character of discussion up to speed with the current game state. Also, I'd be very happy if you would watch these videos in this playlist after you watch this video. As you can see from the video titles and thumbnail, Clara and Arlan are our topics today. It is a bit of a breaking tradition because so far I have only covered 5-star units. Initially I wanted to cover Clara and Yanqing, but because I don't have Yanqing, I don't want to do a content about the unit that I have never played or have any experience with, so I picked Arlan as another topic instead. But for a certain reason, I would like to talk about Clara first. So let me refresh some memory for old players who might have forgotten her or any new players who have never used her. Clara is a counter unit. If you want her to deal maximum damage, you have to catalyst the enemy into insert anything related to child that isn't child labor here. Only then, her Terminator stepdad will come out and give enemy the same treatment as stereotypical American police treat black men. If you go back 2 years ago during 1.0, or during the game launch to be precise, there was a saying, Clara is the best DPS in the game, as in during that environment, if everything goes perfectly. I'm paraphrasing of course since I can't remember the exact quote. And that is still true to this day. Okay, maybe not this part. Due to many reasons, she went from the best to one of the good units, and that is saying something about her strength. And if you are thinking this is just 100% glaze and 1000% cope, I would like to remind you that there are limited 5 stars that fell off harder and faster than her. I am not saying they aren't good anymore or you can't use them. Just like Clara, they also require rather heavy investment to be able to compete in the current environment. Besides the elephant in the room that everyone got hit with, her kit has some crucial flaws despite its effectiveness. As I mentioned earlier, she is the counter characters. She relies on getting hit in order to deal her big damage, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, considering elites and bosses have at least one blast or AoE attack, so she can easily caught a stray. But as a certain Foxian woman might have said, aggro value is a lie. Star Rail being JRPG game doesn't give every player an option to trigger counter, like in fighting games have frame traps to fish for counter hit, or action games like Devil May Cry Bayonetta that have a taunt to influence enemy behavior. Every targeting and action from enemy is RNG based and happen behind the scenes. Sure, Clara can increase her aggro value, and for the sake of argument, let's say she can increase her chance to being hit by 99%. That 1% of not being hit is still resulted in 50-50 chance. I think Sailorman would know what I'm talking about here. But that is RNG problem. It's caused by RNG, it can also be solved by RNG. We can't really do anything about it besides reset, run it back, and hope for better RNG. However, there is another thing that in my opinion held her back even more than just RNG issue. It is how she interacts with toughness bar. Or rather, she really doesn't want to interact with the toughness bar. Because weakness broken enemy cannot take any action and have their turn delayed. So conceptually or strictly speaking from Clara kit design, she doesn't want to break any enemy. Because that would be a massive damage loss since more of her damage comes from counter. Developers tried to remedy this to a certain degree with her skill, but frankly it's just not enough. Even doesn't help her with this issue because of her low speed. Granted, you want the enemy to be faster than her because counter attack, but that means Clara will never be able to take advantages of weakness broken enemy. With that in mind, the best matchup should be any boss elite that doesn't have physical weakness, but that also comes with the problem. Those enemies either have neutral physical resistance or they just straight up have physical resistance. She isn't going to outcompete or outdamage any damage dealer for that specific element because that's just how math works. Since no physical weakness is just out of question, what should be her actual best matchup then? Let's list the situation that she favored her. Physical weakness. Enemy has high amount of effective toughness. Enemy can swarm feel like they play Yu-Gi-Oh! ludicrous speed or bonus action shenanigans, have blast or AoE attack. With those criteria, we have these enemies, which is admittedly a pretty decent matchup spread. But once again, because of the certain elephant in the room, only having a good matchup spread isn't enough for damage dealer. They also have to be able to make a big PP numbers, which Clara theoretically can. This is field crafting, please feel free to call me out on this. But it kinda goes into a very specific situation that can allow her to be able to output somewhat of a decent damage by today's standards. That scenario is pretty much a fight against Touhou, with Robin support and by she I mean Clara, being a hunt marsh driver, but at that point it's just a white woman and hunt marsh do most of the work. Thankfully, Clara still has something else really unique to her among other destruction units. The ability to self-cleanse. 35% just to cleanse one debuff when attacked while it's kinda small, but considering she is destruction unit, which has second highest aggro value after preservation path unit, if your luck isn't that bad, the enemy is more likely going to target her and thus give you more chance to draw a 7-up cleanse. This talent can clutch or just downright nullify some annoying encounter gimmick if that encounter gimmick is debuff based. Not to mention, she also has this major trace, which I don't know if this just translates to 35% effect rates. If it is, it just means she also has similar effect rates to other destruction units on top of her self-cleanse. I yap a lot so people might forget about my point, so let me sum it up for you. Pros: have a decent matchup spread, decent damage output, skill being AoE allow her to deal with full screen of mobs, aggro value manipulation, decent debuff immunity. Cons: relies on getting hit, not high enough numbers, can't take advantage of weakness broken enemy. This is what I propose to alleviate Clara's current problem. Let's start with... second major trace. I was hoping for a talent, but this is fine too. The second major trace feels like an afterthought for me, so I'll just move this effect into her first major trace and give it a new effect. Her new effect is, as long as Clara has enhanced countercharge from her ultimate, Clara gains 15% crit rate. This effect lasts 2 more turns after all enhanced countercharges are used up. I know just give her 15% crit rate sounds pretty absurd, but I would like to remind you that 1. Clara hit already has an oversaturation of attack and damage stat. 2. Himeko also has a free 15% crit rate increase, although it is a bit more finicky to maintain. Now let's move on to her first major trace, because I already mentioned about it. Since it is essentially a combination effect, I'll just give both parameters a higher numbers. Okay, now that the first and second major trace is done, what should I take up next? Well, that was a waste of time. The effect is pretty decent. I'm gonna leave it there, but I would like to add other effects. When Clara launches follow-up attack on the enemy with Mark of Counter, deal additional damage equal to 30, 40, or 50% of the original damage according to the Mark of Counter amount on the enemy. For any player who still remember her kits or still use her, will notice the change in how she works, which will segue into her new talent. The old thing's still there, with additional effects. Mark of Counter can stack up to 3 times. Each stack yield different debuff on the enemy. One stack, reroll enemy targeting if they didn't target Clara. This effect can happen once per enemy turn. Enemy with multiple action will still reroll only once on their first action. 2 stack, provide the effect of 1 stack and 10% attack reduction. 3 stacks, provide the effect of 2 stacks and 10% physical resistance reduction. After Clara launch counter 5 times, advance her next action by 50%. I know it sounds really busted, especially for the reroll on enemy targeting and the 50% action advance, but Clara multiplier is really low, and she has no way to help with her energy, and I don't want her to be just a budget Yuli, so I went for a death by 1000 cuts approach so that Yuli massive burst damage would be more enticing for every player. Sure, you can say she trades multiplier for a better survivability compared to everyone that doesn't these two, but the fact is, just being Rocky isn't going to get any unit very far in the current economy. So she's going to need something to help her deal more damage. Speaking of dealing more damage, I would like to talk about her skill from the current design. Her skill is meant to be a way for her to squeeze some damage out of weakness broken enemy. and it is a really good idea, so I'll be doubling down on this concept. Her skill is pretty much the same with additional effects of, when using skill on weakness broken enemy, Clara launch a counter attack. If she has at least one charge of enhanced counter, consume every enhanced counter attack charge. That counter attack will deal damage equal to 100% of enhanced counter, then multiply by the amount of enhanced counter charges consumed and gain energy multiplied by consumed charges. All mark of counter will be removed after this skill is used. I know, it is very overloaded, but she needs it. The background footage is pretty much Clara being RMC driver and try to take advantage of true damage by getting hit as often as possible. Keep this in mind, this is literally her favorite environment, backed up by Robin to boost her damage as much as possible, and the best I can do with this team is 1180. It doesn't tell you yet she needs a lot of stuff to compete. I don't know what will, man! Since I gave her such an overloaded base kit, I think it's only fair to not touch anything about her Eidolons. Now, let's move on to Arlan. Have you ever had the feeling of, maybe I shouldn't do this? Or maybe I'm making a wrong decision? Or maybe this is a mistake? Oh, fuck off, man! The other reason for why is this video so late, then I'm very lazy, is that I didn't enjoy trying to figure out how to make Arlan work. I'm gonna be upfront and say it here. No, I can't fix him. He is a fucking lost cause. So then, he died as your senpai. Maybe the closet to being a lost cause and Hook being the second closet better? Hey, demo. Okay, every unit I have covered in this series so far has one major drawback or a couple of issues that hold them back from thriving. Arlan is a complete opposite of that. He has one redeeming quality and the rest holds him back. Which is a shame because in my opinion, he is the only enmity unit in Star Rail. For anyone who has a life to live, enmity unit is generally used to categorize unit/characters that want to be in a disadvantaged position to gain certain bonus. The disadvantage often is they want their current HP to be below a certain threshold of their max HP. The example unit would be Touhou from Genshin Impact, or Destruction Blessing in Simulated Universe. These units from Arc Knights, or if you really want to count it, multi-phases boss that change phase on their HP too. Senpai, yeah! I think this will be up to each person interpretation, but for me, I don't count Blade as an immediate unit, because he only wants to lose HP, but he doesn't want to stay at low health or gain any benefit from staying at low health. In a game that is governed by shared resource like SP in order to use skill, being able to use skill freely without having to manage SP is a massive advantage, especially if that unit is damage dealer, since you can spend SP on other things like buff or heal, but that's it. That is his only redeeming quality. Now, I would like everyone to pay attention to this picture. Yes, even you, the guy who played this video in the background. Please look at this picture. By looking at this picture, what can you tell about the characters this picture or traces might belong to? You'll be forgiven to think the characters is a support because these are stats that will be good on attack scaling support. Or, if you are a bit imaginative, the characters might be split scalar through attack and HP. But this is actually Arlan's stat bonus. Duh, is his video and his section. But just a set of bonus stat alone doesn't mean anything. There is a viable characters with downright dysfunctional set of bonus stat. The problem starts to read its head once you include his total stat and skill. Let's start with his talent since it is the most unique thing about him. It is simply an enmity skill. The lower his health is, he gets more damage, capped at 72%, which means his optimal or preferred health range is 1 to 28% of his max HP. Besides getting hit, you have to use his skill, which causes him to lose 15% max HP. This means if RNG decides to be a complete dickhead, it would take 5 actions for Arlan to fully ramp his talent up. If you are either lucky or dedicated enough and can speed tuning Arlan and Bronya or Sunday into something along the numbers shown on the screen, it would still take one whole cycle in MOC before he can have his maximum damage. A little reminder, this is for worst case scenario. I generally don't go into how big number X unit can do because I'm lazy and I don't want to do math, but specifically for him, I think it is somewhat necessary to go into this mindset compared to his version 1.0 4-star damage dealer brethren, of course. Let's compare him to Hook, Sushang, and Daniel, because essentially they are single target focus units. If we just look at their attack stat, multiplier on skill and ultimate, these units should, this is a keyword, should deal a similar amount of damage, but the devils are always in the details. Outside skill and ultimate, there is a way for these three to help them deal more damage. Hook, example, has DOT. Tanheng and Sushang can do action manipulation, albeit very conditional. And Arlan has nothing. He is kinda similar to Lisa in Genshin Impact, with her stupidly high multiplier on her skill, but unfortunately in Honkai Star Rail, there is no system that can help Arlan damage output similar to Genshin's elemental reaction. 先輩、また原神を話したか? Okay, where are we now? Raw multiplier, right? Because he and these characters are 4-star unit with decent multiplier, MiHoYo balanced them out by making their stat on the low end of the spectrum. This translates to their damage floor and ceiling is much lower than 5-star units. What would this mean for anyone who want to use them? You either buff them to high heaven, enough for them to 3 or 4 shot kill any elites or bosses, or you make sure they can take more action in one given cycles, or both. I have no comments about the first approach. If you can afford that and enjoy doing it, more power to you. However, I want to focus on the latter case because that is how I play him. However, given how he is designed, conceptually he just doesn't work well with the team that try to give him as much action as possible because of his talent. Playing at a low health percentage isn't a problem, if the character's health pool is big enough to compensate that downside. The thing is, even amongst 4-star units, he isn't even the one with the highest base SP! That honor belongs to Hook! Yes, this cute and funny looking child has higher HP than the head security of a well-known space station! Since he wants to stay at 28% HP or lower, healing becomes highly discouraged. I'm not saying you can't run him with a healer. You obviously can. His skill will drain HP as long as his HP is higher than 1. But running him with healer effectively turned him into RNG's Arlan experiment. So, the only consistent way to sustain Arlan is shield. But because of how I play him, he gets a lot of turn or action, meaning the likelihood of shield duration expire leaving him very vulnerable is very high. I want to add that the footage background isn't a perfect speed tuning because this is just me putting Clara set on him. A slow set to be precise. But even this super slow set, he's still at risk of shield expire with Aventurine. Speaking of shield, do you know that shield reduction when shield unit is being attacked is calculated from that unit defense stat, not the shielder? Now let's play the game on. In which place do you think Arlan, the enemy unit's defense is ranked? 1 or first meaning highest defense. You have 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. If your guess is in the last place, then I'm sorry, you should have seen this coming. For anyone who have guessed correctly, I wish you to win every 50-50 in every gacha game you play. Now, back to the topic. Not only he has the lowest effective health pool, but also lowest effective shield. Saying he has a hard time surviving is a bit of an understatement. Coupled with his very lackluster damage, make him conceptually the worst characters in the game, in many player opinions, including mine. I've heard about him getting nerfed before, but I don't know how bad it was. So I did some digging and oh boy, they really over-nerfed him. As much as I think reducing his skill damage from 320 to 240 is a bit too much, but at the very least, I can see where they came from. Arlan is a 4-star unit, they can have 4-star being comparable to 5-star now, can they? But out of 4 changes I see, this has to be the worst one. They changed something that actually has a use on him into a complete waste of duplicate. Even after 2 years, there's still no boss or enemy that can delete your units on their first turn. Simulated universe doesn't count. Thus, this idol is beyond useless. The last thing I want to discuss about his current design would be his major traits. All of them focus on survivability, and nothing better describes them than the good, the bad, and the ugly. The first major trait is the most useful here. If you can get his max HP high enough, this should be able to let him survive. The second one is niche, but it has a legit usage. Sure, it is super matchup dependent, but one of Arlan's biggest weakness is DOT. But the third one is just... why? I can't think of any scenario this would be useful. Does this also apply to the wave change? Assuming it doesn't, this does jack shit in MOC, APOC or PF. For whatever reason that inspired anyone to use him in pure fiction, since he can't just reduce his own HP to 50% or lower, and as of writing, and hopefully publishing this video, no units in the game can do party-wide HP manipulation outside of battles, so why would this even matter? No guilt, again, simulated universe doesn't count! If you assume it applies to the next wave, it'd be better. A teeny tiny bit better. Because while it might proc during a wave change, it only offers one-time attack negation. And destruction unit have the second highest base aggro value, and enemy and elites in endgame have high speed. This depends on each player account. And elites and bosses enemy have 2 action, meaning your own fate is still in RNG's Arlan experiment. Arlan downside is so massive to the point his damage has to be high enough to convince any player to or justify building and using him, but that's simply not the case. At least not without insane investment in any support units. I said I can fix him, but that's not the entire sentence. I can't fix him without turning him into 5-star unit. His kit design is very interesting and he has potential to be a very good unit for everyone. I mean, look at the ratio of Clara and Arlan section. He is very interesting to talk about, but in the spirit of this series, I'll suggest some changes to some part of his kit while maintaining his 4-star status quo. 1. Revert him into better version while retaining how his skill currently work, E1 and E2. That's the easiest and simplest way to buff him. Or 2. Buff multiplier on his skill and ultimate by 40%. Change the second major trace into gain 50% effect rest when HP is equal or lower than 50%. Change third major trace into after Arlan use skill or ultimate, gain 65% damage reduction. This effect lasts until Arlan next turn and cannot stack. Also, remove this from E4. Despite everything I talk about so far, the actual problem for Arlan isn't the flaw in his kit or difficulty in playing him. It all hinges on his number he can make, and unfortunately, miHyoYo is, or was, they're set to prioritize profit over game design. Instead of us player having a good high risk high reward characters, we have whatever this is. It's so bad saying low risk low reward would be a legit compliment. With miHyoYo's surprise announcement to buff other characters, it legit fills me with hope that this game might be going toward for a more healthy part for gacha games, and I have high hope they will deliver all the buffs because they are the actual game developer with actual experience, not some random idea guy on the internet. Do you think Clara's change is a bit too much, or do you still think she will still struggle because of what I suggest? Do you think Arlan can be buffed into a good damage dealer? And in your opinion, how would you buff these two? Let me know in the comment. That's it from me. Thank you very much for bearing with me until this point. I wish you all to have a good night and a great day ahead of you. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!